Chronic pain affects everything. Listen to that sentence again. Chronic pain affects everything. So let's start with the body. I have two versions of myself that I engage with. There's the idealized, healthy, sober, full personality Emma, who is this magical, effervescent being who is hilarious and ambitious and energetic and doesn't care if anyone hears her singing in the aisle at the grocery store. And she is so cool. I think she's cool. She's a dork and she's cool. She is capable and magical and glorious. Then there is the sick Emma, who is sad and depleted and whose voice wavers and whose brain is slow all of the time and who doesn't sing anymore and who constantly feels like she's been run over by a train and has zero energy to do anything. This second Emma is just a mere shell of what the idealized Emma, what I like to call the real Emma. Just a shell of who that person is supposed to be. This second Emma, sick Emma, is overflowing with every facet of depression imaginable and is characterized by lassitude and absolute misery. To put it lightly. I am 32 years old. At this point, over half of my existence on Earth has been colored by physical pain related to my chronic illness. Over half of my life. It's only going to get worse from here. The longer I live, the more of my life I will have spent in pain than out of pain. Who did this? Who thought that was fair? My symptoms began around the age of 11. I was not diagnosed until I was 20. At the time of filming this, I am currently experiencing one of the worst periods of consistent, unbearable pain that I've ever had. Every single day hurts. It's difficult to put it into words. Just how awful I feel every day. Every single day is darkened by this misery and this inability to function normally. And if you haven't guessed, it really takes a toll. It's not temporary. It creates this lasting impression that everything will always hurt, and that pain affects everything. Everything. I've been wanting to talk about the relationship of pain to identity, and I'm going to start with the body. So let's talk about a couple of ideas that really affect the way that chronic pain is dealt with in our culture and our society currently. And a lot of it is still the same way that it's been for a really long time. There are implicit biases in medicine with regards to chronic pain. There is a pain bias when it comes to gender. On the whole, women are taken less seriously than men, even when they complain of the same exact pain. Same location, same intensity, whatever it might be. There are a ton of articles and a ton of research out there about this. I'll leave a couple of links in the description, but it's everywhere. Go Google it. So on average, when women are in pain and go to the emergency room to be seen by a doctor, they end up waiting longer in ER waiting rooms than men. And once they are seen, they are less likely to be given effective pain medication than their male counterparts. Additionally, women's pain is often labeled as psychological rather than physiological, and it's not taken with the same seriousness and severity that men often receive, even complaining of the same exact pains. It's kind of funny because if you look at the research, a lot of it has to do with the fact that for so long women were considered the weaker sex, right? That we were considered physiologically more delicate than men, and that we were prone to hysteria, and that these fits of kind of psychological distress would overcome us and would manifest physically. And a lot of those ideas are still being circulated today. It was only up until about the year 1990. 1990. I was already alive at this point, but just barely. 1990, where prior to that time, the majority of medical studies that were being done on illnesses, diseases, chronic pain conditions, etc., the only participants in those studies were men. They literally weren't looking at women and their experiences in their bodies at all. So there is an extreme lack of research on the way that pain even affects women's bodies as it compares to men's. And so a lot of the times, women aren't taken as seriously when we come in and we're complaining of pain. People think that we're over-exaggerating or that it must not actually be that serious, right? On the flip side, a lot of people think that women are supposed to have higher pain tolerances than men because of the whole childbirth thing. So how do those two things go together? We are prone to hysteria, and it's all psychological and it's not physical, and we're not taken as seriously as men, but somehow we're supposed to be able to withstand the pain more? This brings me to another point. If you want to talk about implicit biases when it comes to medicine and how pain is viewed in different patients, it's not just about gender. Race plays a huge part of it, specifically when we're looking at Black women versus white women. Oh my God. When we're just talking about gender, so often the pain of the woman is considered to be not as important as that of the man, because the woman in question is thought of as being weak and she's just not able to handle it and she needs to not worry about it. And what she's experiencing is actually quite normal and she needs to just stop stressing and go about her day, right? But when it comes to Black women versus white women and how they receive attention when it comes to their pain, Black women literally are thought of as having a higher pain tolerance, that their skin is actually thicker than that of white women's, that they have less nerve sensitivities to pain and therefore can withstand more. So when they go to the ER for debilitating, crippling pain and potentially life-threatening problems, they aren't taken seriously for the other reason. It's astounding. Again, articles in the description if you want to do a little bit of reading about this. I do want to read this one section because it just absolutely blows my mind. This is from an article about implicit bias in medicine and how it hurts Black women. A 2016 study found that nearly half of all first and second year medical students believed that Black people have thicker skin than white people and perceived Black people as experiencing less pain than white people. An idea that was born from 19th century experiments that were conducted by a physician named Thomas Hamilton. He was a wealthy plantation owner who regularly tortured an enslaved Black man named John Brown, creating blisters all over his body in an effort to prove that Black skin went deeper than white skin. A 2019 study published in the American Journal of Emergency Medicine analyzed data from 14 previously published studies on pain management and found that Black patients were 40% less likely to receive medication for acute pain compared to white patients, and 34% less likely to be prescribed opioids. And to be clear, this shit is racist. It's wrong. Just wanted to make sure that you realized that. Hashtag white supremacy is everywhere. Yeah. No. Stop it. Dismantle it. Thank you. All of the articles that I looked at for these topics actually name endometriosis as one of the chronic pain conditions that affects women, and disproportionately Black women, way more than it needs to. This idea of implicit bias in medicine when it comes to gender and when it comes to race is one of the leading factors in why it takes so long for any of us to get diagnosed. If you are curious about learning a little bit more about these experiences, particularly of women and other folks of color who deal with endometriosis, and their stories about how long it has taken them to get noticed by a physician and actually get access to quality, compassionate medical care, definitely look up Endo Black and Endo Queer. They are run by amazing, fabulous people, and they are doing wonderful things to educate folks in the endo community and beyond about what's happening to folks of color in our community. So, heavy stuff, right? But let's take this idea of bias when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, and then tie it back to this idea of how long it takes someone to get a diagnosis when they walk in complaining of chronic pelvic pain, such as for endometriosis. It takes an average of 7 to 10 years to actually get diagnosed. If you are someone living with endo, I mentioned in the beginning of this video that my symptoms started when I was 11, which was when I first started menstruating, and I wasn't diagnosed until I was 20. And the only reason I was diagnosed was because I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to finally get an exploratory laparoscopic surgery, because endo doesn't show up on scans. Right? This is one of the things we've talked about. Endo is one of those diseases that can only be definitively diagnosed by physically cutting you open, going in, taking pieces of it out, sending it to a pathologist, testing it, confirming that that is what it is. You can't show, it doesn't show up on x-rays, ultrasounds. Occasionally an MRI might pick up something if there's something really gnarly happening, but otherwise it's not definitive that it's going to show up on a scan. All of the resources that I looked at for this topic talk about how the delays in getting a diagnosis means that the folks who are living with this chronic pain end up having their entire lives shaped by this experience. They have these long stretches of years, decades for some, where they are just trying to exist and survive with their chronic pain, rather than actually having it managed, having it dealt with, and being able to live and thrive, right? You want to thrive, not just survive. Well, for so many of us, we don't have any other option. These implicit biases that create these long delays in getting the quality, compassionate care that we deserve kind of sentence us to these lives of just unnecessary misery, honestly. So let me bring it back down to me for a second. Before I got my diagnosis, I was having all of this unexplained pain. The doctor I was seeing was trying me out on a bunch of different versions of birth control to see if it could manage things. There were some months that were better. There were some months that were better than others. However, when it came to my relationship with my body, like a lot of young women and young people in general, I had very distorted views on what my body was supposed to look like, what my body was supposed to be capable of. And later in high school, I developed a pattern of disordered eating where I would go to school, I would literally stay in my English classroom and read a book instead of go to lunch. I didn't bring any food with me. I wouldn't eat for the entire day. I would get home at like 4 o'clock, 4:30, binge on whatever was in the fridge, usually super random things like taking pieces of bread and dipping them in Texas Pete hot sauce and then just eating it. Yeah, gross, but weirdly satisfying. You're welcome. And then I wouldn't eat dinner. And I would just go to bed and wake up, and next day, same thing. I developed this very strange disordered eating pattern where I was sort of starving myself and then binging all at once and then not eating again. I had horrible perceptions of what beauty and worthiness were supposed to mean as it related to my physical body. There were often times that I was in so much pain that I couldn't get up and go to school. I would be out for a week at a time because I couldn't stand and walk down the hallway to even go to the bathroom, much less actually get dressed and go spend an entire day at school. A lot of the research around disordered eating has to do with control, that it is a way for people to try to get a handle on something in their life when so many other things feel as if they are out of balance and unmanageable, that they have lost control in these certain big ways. And so this is one of the things that they can actually hang on to. And that might have been true for me. There were a lot of things happening at the time. I was dealing with a lot of unprocessed trauma that I didn't understand until years later when I actually started working through it with a psychologist. And this sort of disordered eating pattern just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you start losing a lot of weight. I didn't even really notice how much weight I was losing until people started commenting on it and telling me how thin I looked and that I was looking bad, that I was getting too thin and that I was starting to look sick. Now, I definitely didn't get to a point where I was in actual danger, health-wise, but it was one of those things that made me feel like I'm just trying to figure out how to manage my body. And right now, this is what feels like it makes sense. And that's all I got. Now, fast forward to after my diagnosis, and all of a sudden I get put on all of these insane medications. I have been on hormone therapies. I have been on menopause-inducing medications. I have been on various different pain medicines, a lot of different medications ever since I was 20, and a lot of them have the side effect of weight gain. I will say, as a 32-year-old woman, I definitely have a much rounder, I definitely have a much more in-depth understanding of who I am, and the size and shape of my body is not tied to my worthiness in the same way that it was when I was a teenager and was dealing with all the things that were coming along with that time in my life. However, this is the heaviest that I've ever been, and it's been a slow, kind of difficult process in figuring out how to manage my own expectations of what my body should be, right? And being able to let go of some of that, because some of it is something that I just haven't been able to help. I've been on a lot of medicine where the side effect is literally that I will gain weight or that I will be unable to metabolize in the same way that I had been previously. And I have been focusing a lot in my adult life on making sure that I do not return to these disordered eating patterns that I had when I was in my later teens. So it's a little difficult to talk about because there is a lot of judgment and fear surrounding conversations with regards to our bodies and how high or low that number is on the scale and the way your clothing fits and all of this, right? But I do have to say, it's been really difficult to kind of carry this. It's a literal heaviness. Pun not even intended. There is a literal heaviness on my shoulders that has to do with the fact that my body not only hurts all of the time, but I can't even physically do the majority of the things that I used to be able to do, and I haven't been able to figure out a way to manage my weight in a way that feels healthy and that makes me feel strong, because I'll have a few moments of that. I'll have a few days of that, maybe a few weeks of that, and then the chronic pain just takes over and completely shuts me down. You can't exercise as much when you can't walk and you can't get out of bed and you don't have the energy to even lift your head off the pillow. You just can't. Something else that I have struggled with is the transition from being what I considered to be extremely able-bodied to now inhabiting this label of disability, that there are things that I can't do anymore that I used to be able to do. And even though endometriosis is not currently classified as a disability in the same way that some other similar diseases are and chronic pain conditions are, endo is layered with my post-traumatic stress disorders, which are considered disabilities and affect how I exist with my chronic pain and how I manage it. Anxiety and depression and all of that trauma and the stress that comes with it is inextricably wrapped up with the physical pain, and one affects the other. It makes it very hard to live day to day in a way that feels normal. I have a lot of fear surrounding this. As I age, if I can't get my pain under control, if I can't get my body to a particular consistent level of functionality, I'm so afraid that as I get older, will just continue to lose these abilities and will lose the physical aptitudes that I used to be so familiar with. I was a dancer in college. I've pursued theater for pretty much the 2/3 of my life as well. I've danced, I have done some athletics. I am an intensely adventurous person, and it is excruciating to even be able to go on a walk, a short mile-long walk these days. I am terrified of that continuing to get worse. I am afraid of there being no relief from the pain, and of every single day being like this for the rest of my life. I don't know that I can handle that. I can't handle that. I need something to change. I won't go too deep into it because I think this could deserve its own TED Talk, but obviously physical pain brings with it intense emotional effects as much as it brings the physical ones. My mind literally runs slower. One of the symptoms of endometriosis is something called brain fog. I actually feel as if I have trouble finding words and being able to put them in a particular order in a sentence and being able to say them. I have always felt like a very sharp, intelligent, intellectual person, and these last couple of years especially, I feel like that has declined so much. And talk about value and worthiness. I have placed a lot of value and worthiness on my ability to be an intellectual in the past and to be an academic and to be able to have strong and competent discourse on a regular basis with anyone about anything. And I'm struggling to be able to say good morning to my partner. In addition to feeling like my speech is muddled, I have also lost my singing. I can still sing if I am actively trying to sing and spend some time practicing that skill, but I used to sing loud and all the time and for no reason and just make noise and be funny and be hilarious and be myself, whether I was by myself or around other people. And that is something that has diminished to practically zero. It's very rare for me to be just cooking in the kitchen and actually talking to myself out loud and singing and having a great time and just making stupid noises at myself. It's rare that I do that now. And I used to do that all the time, and I really miss that part of myself. But I just don't have the energy. I don't have the energy. I feel so sapped. I just don't have the energy to expend in that way anymore. I do hope that's something I get back, but we'll see. It's the whole reason I'm on this journey, is to figure out exactly how things are feeling right now and to try some new solutions and hope to God that they actually work. My vocabulary, which used to feel so expansive, feels like it's shrinking. My overall mental stamina to read or to research or to engage in something intellectually that might be a little mentally stimulating, such as learning how to play a new board game even, feels difficult now, and it didn't used to before. And now I am so physically drained that I just don't have the mental capacity to be able to process as much or as quickly as I used to. And this is something that I am spending time on and that I'm trying to work on. And there are some days where it's better than others, but man, I will wake up sometimes and just feel like there's no point in me even being conscious for that day, because not only will my entire body ache to the point of me wanting to just scream, just a primal, disgusting, bloody murder kind of scream. I can't even think about trying to do that because I'm so drained. Those are the days that feel those are the worst. Those are the worst. I used to be happy. I used to, it sounds funny to say it that way, but I did. I used to be happy. I used to be this joyful person. I used to be, at one point in time, I loved being the center of attention, and not in an obnoxious way, at least I hope. I loved being able to engage with everyone, walk into a room and go talk to every single person and check in with how they were doing. And I had all of this energy and all of this buzz, and being able to just constantly be engaging. And I was funny and I made stupid jokes and corny puns, but I liked it and I made myself laugh. Oh my God, I miss making myself laugh. And all of these personality traits that made me the quirky, weird, fabulous Gryffindor theater kid that I have been for so much of my life, and so much of it feels like I've literally watched it wash off me in the shower and then just circle and disappear down the drain. That's actually what it feels like. Like, the aspects of my personality that make me me, that real Emma, right, have just been dripping off of me and washing away and disappearing into the gutter. It is a horrible feeling, if you can't tell. I want to finish this conversation out with a timeline reminder. At the time of filming this video, I am exactly 1 week out from my surgery. I will be having my second laparoscopic surgery to find and hopefully remove all of the endometriosis lesions that are there. I will be having a cyst in my left ovary removed. A few other things will be removed and or repaired depending on how things look. I will also be having a hysterectomy where, as far as I understand it at the moment, my uterus and cervix will be removed, but my ovaries will be preserved. Women were thought to be hysterical. That's why they call it a hysterectomy. They are removing the hysteria from my body. This last week, I have been attempting to take myself on short walks. My very ambitious hope was that I would be able to do short walks at least once a day, every day for about a week, and it's been more like every 3 days I've been able to remind myself to try to do it. I went on a walk earlier today. It's been a pretty high pain day and it did not feel great, but I managed to do it. Moral of the story is chronic pain affects everything. It affects the way you interact with other people. It affects the way that you interact with yourself. And I don't feel like Emma when I am in pain. And lately, I am in a lot of pain all of the time. Even just going through the filming process of this video, my voice is getting tired and is starting to sound gravelly, and it's hurting to sit up straight because I feel like I have this very sharp weight in the front of my abdomen that's just pulling me down, and I need to go lay down and stop talking and stop doing things. There is so much more that I can say on this topic of pain and identity, and I may continue to explore that. The best thing that I could do, and the best thing that I could ask of you, anyone who is engaging in this material with me, is to do some work on your own implicit biases, especially if you are if you are in or happen to know someone who is in the medical field. The thing about implicit biases is that we don't always realize that we have them, and it's something that we have to dismantle actively, and particularly with regard to race and to gender. Chronic pain is an area where there are so many people who frankly die because they didn't get the care that they needed when they needed it. So, much love. We are getting into that super weird holiday season of 2020. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. And cheers.